Deirdre Verbo here. Thank you for joining us and Let's Talk Seniors, Memory Care Issues, Alzheimer's, Dementia, and Parkinson's. Today we have a very special guest. We have Ms. Loretta Veney. Some of you may know her as a top motivational speaker in the caregiver world. Loretta Veney, is a motivational speaker and trainer, and she's developed more than 300 speeches and presentations on dementia and caregiving, and has been doing this since 2014. She offers a wealth of information, encouragement, and humor to audiences. Throughout her life, she's been the author of a few books. One is Being My Mom's Mom, Colors Flowing from My Mind, and Refreshment for the Caregiver Spirit, and she will share how she came up with that name. She has chronicled family events through journals, photos, and videos, seeking to capture every moment. Her documentation came in very handy in 2006 after her beloved Doris, the first female in the family to suffer from dementia. Loretta began learning everything about the disease, being a fierce advocate for her mom in the process. Loretta and her mom have been featured in articles in the Wall Street Journal, Psychology Today, the Washington Post, the New York Times, AARP Caregiver Stories, as well as PBS special entitled Alzheimer's, the Caregiver's Perspective. In 2019, Loretta was selected as a Trailblazer of the Year by Johns Hopkins Medicine. That's amazing. And she's here today to tell us about herself and her 92-year-old mom, who's still with her. So welcome, Miss Loretta. How are you?
Thank you, Deirdre. I'm perfect. How are you?
I'm fabulous. You have such a great spirit, and thank you so much for coming on to help caregivers, especially in this
Yes.
time of need that we need extra TLC. Everybody's feeling the, sheltering and getting a little antsy, I'd say. Like having fever. If you didn't have it the first few months, you have it the last few, right?
Exactly. You do, right?
So how did you get into all this even before your mom had dementia? Like, what was the impetus to start researching dementia and knowing all this information?
I didn't do any of that before, she was diagnosed because it was not in our family. I always researched topics, though. So, my master's degree is in forensic science. So I was always into how did that happen and who killed whoever. So I was, really...
Forensic science way before it was the most popular thing.
Yeah, well, because this was way before CSI and all that stuff. That was like probably 10 years later. But yes, and I used to love to figure out the puzzle, who did it or what happened. And so that really was kind of the perfect foundation for the whole investigation into Alzheimer's, how you should deal with it, that kind of thing. So at least I was the only preparation I would say I had was at least the ability to know how to, do research into the different, topics. But other than that, like every other family out there, I was floored by the diagnosis. Like, what? My mom was 77 when she was diagnosed. And, my great grandmother had lived alone until she was 100. So I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute. You're not going to live by yourself till you're 100. And no, we used to always joke about that my mother would live forever. My sister used to always say, she's going to outlive both of us. And, we always thought that. She still might.
15 years. So she said 15 years.
15. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so you have longevity in your family.
Yeah. My great-grandmother died to live to be 106.
Wow.
Yes. And pretty much knew everybody until the year before. She could say who you were married to. You were like, wow, she knew everybody. So when, I'm looking at my mother like at 77 thinking, wow, you're so, in our family, that's young. My grandmother only died at 90 because she had colon cancer and they thought she was healthy enough to do chemo and surgery. And she's like, no, I'm going to do nothing, and died. And she did. Other than that, I think she absolutely would have lived to be 100 as well. So
Loretta, you have longevity in your family. Have you tested to see if you have the dementia gene?
I get that question a lot. I have not. And I think just my perspective, sort of on life. I'm trying to rush and do everything just in case I have an RV. So I'm trying to drive all around the country to see everything that I want to see in case it shows up. So I've spoken to a lot of caregivers who have had grandparents and everybody, and a lot of them want to get tested. And I, at this point, don't want to know. So I'm just trying to,
Blame you.
I just try to live every day. And I know people who have the, had the test and probably wish they hadn't done it. But
I mean,
yeah,
it
so
sounds like you're living your life every day to
yes,
max, in case, not just, it's a good philosophy, not just in case you get dementia, in case you're hit by a car or
yeah,
die tomorrow, right? So get COVID.
yeah.
So it's great to live your life to the fullest and not worry about, because, you don't need another thing to worry about when something
That's so true.
right?
That's so true. I just do, every day I try to get up and say, okay, what's going to happen today, and see, what happened. I think that's how most of us have survived the pandemic. It's just to say, wow, okay, what is today going to be like? So, and I have learned just, I've said all along, I think you and I even had this conversation, the importance of preparation. But in the pandemic, you can make a plan, in here in Maryland, restaurants open for a while, then they close, then they opened again, then they closed, then they open. You're like, what? Carry out, and then you can eat in. You're like, oh my goodness. So rather than plan a whole lot of stuff, I just try to take one day at a time, and that seems to be the best way to go at it.
It's funny you say that, because I was telling my daughter had a baby this week, and
Yes.
she and her husband came up with a birthing plan. And I'm like, birthing plan?
Mm-hmm.
What they wanted for the birthing plan. And as soon as they got to the hospital, that went out the window, and she's like, yeah. I was like, I'm thinking,
Okay, that's funny.
She's
I have heard those birthing plans don't always work out the way you had intended.
But it's like you say, prepare for everything.
Yes.
Be ready for anything, right? Because,
yes.
So this is what you suggest for people to do with seniors and people with Alzheimer's, right? This is a good motto for our current world situation.
It really is. And I think to prepare for everything, I mean, if you just look back, even before, I know it's hard to go back past the pandemic, but if you go back, even just a few years, look at the amount of, just natural disasters we've had, tornadoes, hurricanes, flood, I mean, just massive ones, across several states and all that. And yet, when you get the word, from your community, okay, we're evacuating, you're like, wait, where's all mom's stuff? You got to have a go bag with your flashlight, and, you have half the pills, but you left the other half in the medicine cabinet. You're like, so you got to have that bag with the blanket and the thing. So the more we think these situations through, just be ready. It's the whole thing about being ready. So like if you're going to the doctor, you mentioned in my bio about what an advocate I am for my mom. I go to the doctor with her with all my questions in a row, and we are not leaving until you answer all of the questions. So when you prepare, because then, you're driving back home, you say, I forgot to ask about so-and-so. So you have to prepare for all of these things, because if it's like some of the doctors around here in the Washington, D.C. area, where it takes 3 or 4 months to get an appointment, you're going to wait 4 months to get your question answered. So I try to write every possible thing that I can, imagine to do. And, my greatest preparation or lack thereof was for my mother being an escape artist from her group home. She got out not once, not twice, but 3 times. So finally I had to get for the woman a GPS for her shoe. And yes. So, and the reason why I say prepare for that, you have to know the person you're caring for. So first I started with just a wristband with her name on it. It had my name. It said I was her kid. It had my number that you just put on the screen, and that she was allergic to penicillin. That didn't work that well, because it had my number and stuff. And they would call an 800 number, but it didn't have her address. So if people found her, which they did, then you don't know what to do with her other than call that number. But in any case,
got somebody's mom here.
I don't know who she is, but here you go. So I ended up with the GPS for the shoe, because one of the things, all behaviors are different in the different individuals who have dementia. One of the things my mother used to love to do years ago was take all her clothes off. And so I would tell people, if you're going to visit before 3 p.m., because after 3, when sundowners usually starts, don't hold me accountable for any behavior that occurs. And then yet people would call me and say, oh, I went to see Doris and she took all her clothes off. I said, well, what time did you go? At 3:30. Did I tell you not to go after 3 o'clock? Don't hold me accountable because she was naked, really. So because she never takes off her shoes, she tries to sleep in her shoes at times. So I thought, I know my mother well enough to know most of these GPS little tracker things you can get are, just smaller than a chapstick, like a little key fob. And if you put that in their clothes or their backpack or whatever they're wearing, she would find that thing and says, "Oh, this is not mine," and she would toss it. And all those GPS things cost like $200, so it would be in the trash. And so the one in your shoe is just, you get two insoles, just like you would at CVS. One has the tracker in it, and one doesn't, and it just keeps you even, obviously. And it's called Smart Sole, SOLE, Smart Sole.
I love it.
And it is extraordinary. It tracks you to right where you're standing. And so how it works is you set the parameter at the front door or wherever you want it to be. So when the door opens and she steps over that threshold, my phone vibrates like an Amber Alert.
Wow.
And you know she's escaped. And so what they do is, if they're going on, before COVID, when they went on field trips, they would call me and say, we're going on a field trip. We're going to make some cookies or wherever they were going. I'd say, okay. So then, you can turn it off. Other than that,
your mom wanders, but she's not in a memory care place where they have a keypad.
So yes. So yeah, that's a great question. So the time that she got out of her current group home, it wasn't anybody's fault really. It was just a comedy of errors. It was open house day where prospective people and their families come for a tour.
Yeah.
And they had an emergency situation where a woman who had been removed from one group home for punching another resident, this current group home owner agreed to take this woman, and they were admitting her right away. So the RN, who's usually watching everything, and the primary caregiver, my mother was sitting in a chair 1 minute, and then when the family who had been on the tour went out, my mother went out with them.
Oh, she's visiting. Okay. She is in a home that is.
She is.
But she still can get out. I love. Did you get those online? Those are so cool.
The what? Which thing?
The Smart Soles.
Yes. So it's you just Google that, and it has a really cool website. It has you see the little sole of the shoe, and then it has a tracking map that you see. And so even before I took it home, put it in the shoe, I bought it, and then I drove to the group home. You could see when I got home, I looked at my phone, you could see all the places I had been it was still in the box.
Oh, I love it. That's so much fun.
It was perfect.
Cool.
So you learn these, prepare for everything. So you have all this stuff. And, one of people's favorites presentations of mine during COVID that I wrote after the lockdown, I wrote it in like 6 days, were engaging activities for every Alzheimer's stage. And so when all the adult daycare places started closing down, everybody was calling me saying, okay, mom is at home. What do I do with her all day? And so people were freaking out. So I have all these demonstrations of little apps or fidget toys or the little robotic dogs, all kinds of things that you show. So I try to have as many things as possible, because when they get to the moderate to late stages of dementia, you might have all these activities, but they might play with it for 5 minutes, like your kid did at Christmas. Okay, I opened this toy, and what else you got? They play with it for 10 minutes and then never look at it again. And so I find that a lot of adults with dementia just like that. So I try to have as many things to choose from as possible, because what they like today, they may not like tomorrow. So that's the whole thing about preparing for everything, but being ready for anything.
So now, how did you get into writing books and being a motivational speaker?
That was a pure accident. And then, because I had written so many things down, before that, I always had, chronicled family events, not a family reunion per se, but everybody's birthday, I would take little notes, and we would take pictures and laugh and talk. And so, yeah, it was just kind of an accident. And I think my thing was, I was so shocked by the diagnosis. I thought to myself, am I the only person that feels this way? Like, what am I supposed to do next? And so I felt so lost. I was hoping this would be a guide, being my mom's mom would be a guide for other people who get the shock of this. Like, what do I do now? What do I do first?
Do you have the book there?
I do. There it is. Being my mom's mom.
Nice.
And so she came up with the title because we were in a McDonald's and she wanted apple pie. And I told her she could have apple pie after she ate all her lunch. And the cashier burst out laughing. And my mother looked right at her and said, I used to be her mom and now she's mine. So there you go. And so we kind of tussled over the lunch. She did eat the lunch, but she got her apple pie. So yes.
That's great. Yeah, I remember one of my girlfriends went through breast cancer, and she kept a huge notebook of every single thing and different
Yes.
methods and different things she
Yes.
tried and
Yeah.
different clinics and everything. All her research, there were like 3 notebooks of it.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes, it's great because then the next person that you know, you're like, here you go. I did a lot of research already because it is shocking.
It is shocking. And I don't know how, and one of the things that I think I really believe this. I was sick years ago. I was in the hospital all the time. I had 20 operations. It took me 13 years to get well. And I chronicled a lot of that too. You know, the drugs we tried, all that kind of stuff. And I believe that the way I had organized that and the joy I still brought to it, in spite of the fact I was in a lot of pain, I think that really prepared me for, if you can prepare for dementia, because, you know, the most hurtful day of your life in dementia land, as you know, is when your parent forgets who you are. And that's the worst day ever. And so so I think my earlier health challenge of my own, I've always been a really person who, you know, probably number one value is empathy. And so I think when you switch with that person, how would you really feel if you didn't know anything, or, you know, you didn't know anybody? And so people always talk about how much patience I have with my mom. And I think it's because I certainly don't know what that's like, but I certainly know how I would feel if it was me. So all the people say, oh, you're so patient with your mom. How you do that? I was like, she earned every ounce of this patience. She really did. I think, you know, she did so great with us.
To face it, you'd want that apple pie.
Yes. Yes. So yeah.
So when you say prepare for everything, like what other things could people prepare for? Are you saying prepare once you get the diagnosis that your parent has dementia?
Oh, I would say way before that, because I think where my greatest fear was, and just honestly, the primary reason I ended up with this book will not only help other people, but I just had a huge fear, overwhelming fear that my mother was going to outlive my money. So when I say prepare for everything, one of the things I always suggest is early on, and I see a lot of the millennials doing it now, having these I always suggest family meetings. I was like, I don't care if you're 30, go home and ask your parents, where do you want to live when you get to be older? And they're like, why are you asking that? Ask. And then look at the money and see if the money is there to accommodate that request. Because friends my age, some of them have had to declare bankruptcy for caring for their parents. Some of people younger than me find out that their parents put a second mortgage on the home that they didn't know anything about, and that's how they were supposed to pay for their care in this fancy senior living place that they wanted to live. So that's what I mean. Prepare early on, and, you know, so just have realistic.
Look at the
finances. So finances would be first. Have the family meeting, and especially if you have more than one sibling. It was just me and my sister, and we always knew I would end up with my mother, because my sister was the oldest, but she had no patience. And yeah, so that would not have gone well. So I was going to get my mother all along. And so we just joke about that. And my mother was different from so many people that I know. My mother was the one who decided she was never going to live with her kids. And so she made us sign a document to that fact, which we did. So that's how she ended up in this group home. My husband would have loved to have had he worshiped my mother. He would have loved to have had her here with her, but she was like, oh no, I want to be independent. So if you asked her today, or she can't answer it now, but a couple of years ago, if you asked her, even though there was a roommate like 20 feet from her, she would tell you she lived on her own. She don't have any kids. She never been married. She lived by herself. Okay, good.
Honestly, she is not in your house or inconveniencing.
That's correct.
Her kids.
So she's by herself.
That was her wish.
That was her wish.
She was to live by herself. It was not to inconvenience her children. Right.
Yes, and so the financial piece would be first. And if the finances, you know, don't really support where the individuals want to live, then you all talk about options. And, you know, so these family meetings really save a lot of guilt in the future. Oh, I hope mom would like this place I put her in. If we discuss all that beforehand, then there are no surprises. So finances would be the first thing, and then looking at, you know, how healthy they are, what kind of things that we might anticipate in the future. That's why I think a lot of people are doing the 23andMe and all these other genetic things to see what might be in the future. So that's funny that you asked if, you know, I would want to know. And right now I'm just going to try to live it out without knowing whether I'm going to get that in the future. But I have tried to, you know, I've met with some families one-on-one, especially when there was discord amongst the siblings about where mom and dad should end up. And then one of them's controlling all the money. And so he or she is the one that everybody else has to listen, whether they agree or not. So there's a lot of family feuds out there about that kind of thing. But if you have these family meetings where the person can speak for themselves
Right.
early on, then you can avoid all that. So that's really what I mean, looking at all the aspects, sort of the future to be, prepared. So
I actually just did that myself, Loretta. I just did my whole trust and everything.
Did you really? Yes.
My eldest, and my everything, because, anything could happen anytime, right? So
we have learned that last year, haven't we? Wow.
Yeah, it's very important. So what else can people prepare for? So let's say your parent doesn't want to have this conversation.
Yes, and over time, that happens a lot when people don't want to have the conversation. And I'll suggest, the term conversation starters. You can get on AARP or the Alzheimer's Association, and they have all these things you can do. Like if you're trying to get the keys from dad, you really shouldn't be driving anymore. And there are all kinds of ways you can, have that discussion. So there's all kinds of websites that help you with those difficult conversations. And so I in some of the support groups, what we have done, which is really cool, is you practice with a friend. So you be my mom and I'm trying to explain to you why you have to move. I don't want to move. And so they play the role and everything. And that's so helpful because you can practice not raising your voice. You can practice, not losing your temper and all kinds of things to kind of, prepare for that. So that's one of the things that I always suggest, people do. And like you said about the trust and all that, I would never, ever have thought about a trust to pay for my mother's care if something happened to me. So when my husband died, you're lost, of course, and my broker bought a elder care attorney for me who put my house in the trust. That way, if I get coronavirus or get by a bus or something tomorrow, the sale of my house would pay for my mother's care, and then my daughter would get what was left because my daughter likes to shop. So she would be at the mall and my mother would be homeless. So whatever's left, then you can go to the mall. Yes, you and my granddaughter could have a big party or whatever. But yeah. So I would never have thought of that. Mm-hmm.
So preparing financially. Now, is there a way to prepare emotionally?
That is a fabulous question. The answer is yes, I believe so. I did a lot of reading, listening to TED Talks. One of the support groups I was in was reading a book on forgiveness and guilt because so many caregivers virtually drop dead from the guilt of either I put my mom in this home and I shouldn't have. Look at all the people who were so distraught who wanted to go into the assisted living to get their parent out during the COVID and all that. So yes, I would suggest reading, TED Talks, podcasts, whatever you have to try to prepare yourself. These diseases, no matter what they are. I had also done a lot of research into MS. My sister died of MS. And so I never told my mother, my sister, or my husband died. So you have to prepare for all these kinds of emotional things. And people were shocked that I wouldn't do that. But I was like, well, what is my mother supposed to do with that information? Why would I tell her that? So she never asked about them, and I didn't say. She did see that video, the PBS special we did, and my husband was in that. And she said, "There he is." But that's all she said. She never said anything else about it. So we were like,
well, it's only because you studied this and you know what to do and what not to do. And I think a lot of people, I met with a gentleman yesterday who was 70 and his mom was 90 and she was full on dementia. And he was like, oh, I asked her if she wanted to go and move. She says no. I'm like,
oh, wow. Yeah. So emotionally, there's just a lot. Some people do, spiritual stuff, talk to your chaplain. There's a lot of support groups in churches. I've spoken at a lot of churches, and a lot of people are, don't want to forgive their parents. And we had a big family secret that I found out after my mother's diagnosis too. And I was like, what were you thinking? It was one that impacted my entire life. And yet, as mad as I was when I found out the secret, there was not a thing I could do about it. I had to let that go. And so some pastors at church had asked me specifically to talk about that, how I was able to move on from that heartbreak and forgive my mom because it was 3 years after she could have conversation. And I was like, from this point on, you just pretend today's the first day of the rest of your life, and everything else that they've done in the past goes out the window. Now, that does not apply to physical or sexual abuse as children, because I have a friend right now whose father has dementia and does not remember that he molested his kids, and yet he fully expects him to take care of them. And they have been trying, but eventually one of them called the police on herself so that she wouldn't hurt her dad. So you have to just be really put thought into that, depending on what your family dynamics are from the past, in order to be the best caregiver you can be emotionally. That's a great question.
Are there a lot of support groups for caregivers and for families that are dealing with parents?
A ton. And even before COVID, there were all these online. If you get on Facebook and you type in Alzheimer's and dementia, 160 groups easy. Spouses of, siblings of, children of. Because, I have a totally different situation than somebody that's married to somebody with dementia. Now you have to take into account sex and all this kind of stuff. I don't have that issue, with my mom. So,
marital assets, the house.
Yeah. So it's great to have.
Spouse is 15 years with dementia and you're alone.
Yep.
My mother's friend, that situation. Yeah, it was not good.
Yeah, it was not good. So, I love the fact that they're very specific support groups. And even before COVID, like I said, you didn't have to go outside to do those. You could just do those online. But there are a lot of live ones now. They're meeting virtually, of course, but there are a lot of Alzheimer's Association has, in-person thing. You mentioned the Johns Hopkins Medicine. I've spoken to probably every one of their 17 support groups. They have people under 30 support groups. They have this group, that group. And I've spoken to probably every one of them dealing with caregiving.
What do you do, Loretta, when you realize that your parents are just starting to go into that zone?
So I would learn everything you can right away. I would try to get them to a neurologist to make suggestions. I would also say, don't allow anybody to force your parents to take any of these medicines that are out there, because it doesn't cure the disease at all. It slows it down, but it also has a lot of side effects that you want to. My mother never had a hallucination in her life until she took Aricept. And every side effect that was on the Aricept sheet my mother had, including it stopped her heart. And so that was a bad day, yes. And they got her back and all that. But I would say research is critical in terms of that, because then you all can make those family decisions too. Do you want to put her on this drug or not? My mother was adamant she didn't want to take anything. So listen to what your loved one says as well. So I would say, talking to a neurologist, even if you do nothing, listen to they can give you pamphlets or give you at least some idea of what to expect, especially if they have Lewy body, which is the worst one you can have, where that you act out a lot, you get really aggressive, you have a lot of things that are not just with, let's say regular dementia. So if you had small children, like a very good friend of mine whose husband had early onset in his early 40s, and she very soon had to put him in a home because her children were like 3 and 5, and she thought he had pushed the wife down the stairs one time, they get these night terrors, and she thought he would hurt the kids.
Did she know what it was?
She did. She thought it was brought on by the military, so that VA, stepped in and did whatever. But yeah, she knew what it was pretty much right away. When he was, he got lost. He was doing a marathon and turned around, went the wrong way in a marathon. He had run like 5 or 6 marathons, and they went to the doctor probably like right from the marathon. She knew something was terribly wrong. They thought he was missing. And they found him, a mile or so away from the finish line, looking all around like he didn't know where he was. So,
you know a story I hear often, and tell me what to even do about this, right? That, people are caring for their elderly parent with dementia, and they just think they're just being such a pain. They've always been a pain. They're always like crazy, and now they're just crazier because they got older and then they could get away with things. I'm like, okay, I didn't know your mom before, but this is not typical behavior of aging. Yeah. And they don't recognize it. They recognize it as the parent being more difficult than usual. Like the parent was now more difficult. So maybe they had some underlying personality issue before, and now it so the kids are not recognizing it as an issue per se, just like more of a pain in the neck. And I get this all the time. And I'm like, but anybody sitting there could see that your mom
could see it. Yeah, denial it's a terrible thing. And I think sometimes I've known friends that have not become friends after that, because some of the friends would try to say, well, you're just in denial in a nice way. But because if your parent, they know you're leaving them home alone and they're cooking and leaving the stove on, I mean, they could. So I would rather somebody not speak to me than say nothing. And so I've seen in other support groups where somebody has gotten, if they were religious people, somebody has gotten the priest involved, and maybe the priest came and talked to them, or a chaplain or a social worker or somebody that you would trust that could have things. Or, I love how the Alzheimer's Association trains some of the, what they call their group facilitators to, manage things like that and help families work through that, because they're not social workers per se. So a lot of people are threatened by that. Social workers, they bring in a social worker like you don't know how to take care of your parents. But if it's just another
services on you or something.
Yeah. Yes. So, but if it's a friend or somebody that's trained to maybe help talk you through it, because maybe you don't want to hear that from your sister or your next door neighbor. But some strangers, like, listen, like you just said, I don't know your mom, but I can tell you this behavior we just watched her do is not a normal aging thing. And they're like, oh. So sometimes it takes somebody that's not close to the situation to address it. Yeah. I love that.
I asked this gentleman yesterday, is your mom bathing? And he said, I think she gives herself sponge baths. I'm like, you think?
Mm-hmm.
She's not even near a bathroom. Like, and could she be left alone if you didn't live there? No.
Right.
Okay. So these are not like, I say my mom's aging too, but she's not sitting in a room thinking of ways to kill you. Like,
Right.
That's what his was doing. And she's like, oh, she's just always been crazy, and that's crazy. I'm
wow.
Like, But I see that a lot. And I say, I'm not sure really what to say to people, but I'm like, it's kind of like you watched your kid grow up, so you didn't notice he gained a foot till a relative comes and says he got so tall, right?
He's so much taller. Yes.
Experiencing it.
That really is true. Sometimes you're so close to it. Yeah. And I always, will try to make a recommendation. Like I said, I've met with a lot of families, and there's always some sort of, unrest. And it's usually like that. Two of the siblings recognize we need to put her over here or over there. And then everybody else is in denial, and big fights break out. And it's sad to watch that dynamic. And nobody knows what it will take for somebody to be a believer, I guess, because somebody else's mother, who was in one of the group homes with my mom before, even when that person, got out and got lost and couldn't even tell the person where they lived, the daughter was shocked. She ended up getting her mother back, but she was lucky because, she was in such denial that she just broke out in tears when the family said, we asked her all kinds of questions. She didn't know where she was or anything. The daughter was shocked at how bad it really was. And she was very lucky to get, her mom back. You just never know how.
Oftentimes people can hide it if you're just talking to them on the phone. You're talking to them like my aunt could talk all day long about politics and all, but you ask her other things. No.
And nothing. Yes.
Right. So
they get to be so good at covering. That's the scary thing. You're like, wow, she just made that up. But they get really good at that. And like you said, if you don't live in the same town or whatever, they could, just know you forever.
I know. It's amazing. You have two other books, right?
Yes. So in addition to that, I have the Refreshment for the Caregiver Spirit, which is a photo, inspirational photo book of pictures of my husband and I took around the world. We added some motivational sayings to lift up caregivers on the really down days. And it's called Refreshment for the Caregiver Spirit because we want to uplift people. But I had to include the word refreshment because it's my mother's most famous and most favorite word in the world. Every time we would go, to a place, wherever it is. And she would say, where are the refreshments? So that's how we got that in. And then the coloring book is colors flowing from my mind. And that came from her too. And it's just bigger spaced coloring areas, because when they get dementia now, you can't do the little lines and stay in the lines and everything. So this one is good for little kids who can't color in the lines, and then for adults who that still looks like. So I call it an intergenerational coloring book, which is really kind of cool. So and it's pretty cool. And she helped me pick out the designs and everything. So I put her picture on the back with mine, and so she's very proud of that she's on the back too.
Where can people get these, Loretta?
So they can either get on my website, lorettaveney.com, and I can send them a signed copy of the books, or they can get them on Amazon as well.
Ah, very nice.
Yes. So lorettaveney.com is the website. I just went to the post office today and I mailed out 10 books. and they're all signed and ready to go. So, and I do free shipping as well, just like Amazon.
Oh, that's so nice.
I know, right?
And you are amazing because you speak to all different groups. Who is your favorite group to speak to?
Oh, I love the John Hopkins groups. They are just like my family. And, I live about an hour, not quite an hour.
Are they doctors or soon to be doctors, or who are they?
So that's a great question. They have a support group, a support program within Johns Hopkins Medicine called to Care. And they do everything from these folks. So they have all kinds of copies of my books, and they get together for teas and luncheons. They have speakers, and they all hug when we went back when you could hug. We hug and do things, and they just have so many programs, and it's unbelievable. And the different size, programs and groups that they have. They have inner city residents in Baltimore, and then they have folks who live in the most affluent sections of Baltimore. So it's amazing to watch all of these groups of people come together and unite over these diseases that are, just killing our families. And so I really love them. They work so hard, making sure that every caregiver, no matter where you live or, what your circumstances are, they make sure everybody feels like they have everything they need to be a great caregiver. And the program is aptly titled, Called to Care. Some of us, didn't raise our hand, but we're all they have. So
I love it. Listen, Loretta, you've been fabulous. If anybody wants to get in touch with Loretta, they can go online to Loretta Veney .com to get her books or see more about where you're going to be speaking.
Yes.
And definitely prepare for everything and be ready for anything. And you know what? I'm really looking forward to seeing you on Oprah one day.
Okay, I'll let her know. Thank you so much.
It would be my dream come true too, but it would.
I know, right?
Such a pleasure to see you there because I think this is such a great topic, and I think it's an underspoken about, if that's a word, underspoken about.
Yes, that's a word.
Yeah, it's just something that people are going through oftentimes alone and feeling the guilt that they're not doing enough when they're doing
exactly.
Everything. So it's great that you're out there promoting big hugs for everybody and books and lectures and speeches. But thank you so much, Loretta. We'll be back again soon, right?
All right, thank you. Take care.
Bye. My best to your mom.
I'll give her a hug for you whenever it's safe.
Thank you so much. Bye, Loretta. Wow, she is amazing. I know I was going to love her. She is a cutie. So Loretta still has her mom, 92 years old. And so she has now really made herself an expert on this topic. And so Loretta Veney.com, go on her website. It's very inspirational. You'll see clips of her speaking and books and everything else that she has. It's amazing. She's amazing. So thank you so much, Loretta, for coming on. And until tomorrow, I thank you all.
Hi, Deirdre here again. Thank you for joining me on Let's Talk Seniors Memory Care Issues. Is this an issue hitting home? Do you have a parent or loved one with memory care issues who feels not safe at home anymore? Are isolation, falls, and safety issues becoming a big concern? Welcome to Dogwood Senior Home, premier boutique residential senior living specializing in memory care. It's country living at its best in the Huntington section of Shelton, Connecticut. We're truly a home with only 6 senior residents living as one family unit. Senior residential homes are concepts sweeping the nation with 47,000 across the U.S. We're pleased to open Dogwood Senior Home as it will be only number 6 for Connecticut. Brand new, sparkling clean, opening mid-June. And safe. We are COVID-free. Residential care homes boast a very low COVID infection rate across the nation. This is due to the intimacy of size and speed in which the caretakers can shift to accommodate immediate needs. They are much safer than the large homes and facilities, as you can imagine. It has been documented that residents have less falls and a better quality of life in a residential home environment. Our home is more affordable than the big box facility. You pay one all-inclusive price, and that price is guaranteed for the life of the resident. With an incredible 1-to-3 caregiver ratio, which you won't find anywhere else. Our friendly, loving caregivers are dedicated and trained and Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson issues. We're only taking 6 residents, so the home will fill up fast. Call me at 203-689-7562 for a talk and tour. I would love to meet you and your loved one. See you soon. Bye.